first question to our panelists is, what is it that, engages you on a day-to-day basis now? And what is that work like? So we've gotten a glimpse, so I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more specifics about what it is that you do and maybe how it is or why it is you got into the worlds that you're currently navigating. So no specific order here, but if anyone wants to take it away, go ahead. No.
First, beginning in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, and really being thankful that we've been able to gather together in a time of peace among one another. I think that it's important for us to take a continued moment, Rabbi, not a day or a week, but to create an era that will be reflective of the sense and the understandings that we've been wrestling with as you were reflecting on the life and legacy of the people who were part of the civil rights movement, and really looking at Dr. King as emblematic. I think quite often we wind up being in a place where we're here, Woodbury, and we're close to the home of the Madison brothers. And sometimes maybe we forget that it wasn't about the personality of Thomas Jefferson. It was about the words and the work that they did to frame the society that we live in. And so while we are reflecting on the life and legacy of Dr. King and those great marches and activities that we engaged in, I want to, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, you can look me up on Instagram. Rabbi, I'm going to disagree with you, because as a person, I'm old enough to have remembered the sign that said, no blacks, no Jews, and no dogs allowed. Right. And so when Dr. King talks about we are part of a fabric of a society, we're knitted together as a single garment, that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. I want to remind you, as I remind myself, Dr. King says the most compelling issue for human beings is, what do you do for others? When you look at yourself and you say, okay, I'm okay. Look around, there's somebody else, they're not okay today. What is it in you that makes you human enough to care about the condition of someone else? Not waiting until you're in a situation and you need somebody else, but when I'm in that state where I feel I've been blessed, I'm okay. Muhammad Ali said, service is the rent that we pay for our accommodation on earth. If you want to know, Taj, what drives me, I want to pay my rent. I know that the air that I breathe, and we have to work actively to make sure that as a people, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain, Zoroastrian, atheist, agnostic, we have to create a world where we can breathe the air and drink the water. That is compelling for us. And so for me, what moves me, my mother grew up on a dirt farm in Louisiana. I remember growing up, visiting my grandparents, drawing water from a well, going to the bathroom at an outhouse. My mother escaped poverty because she went to a Rosenwald school. I invite you to look it up. See, some of you you didn't pull your phone out, but I know you're Googling or doing something right now. It was the head of Sears and Roebuck, who was at that time the CEO and Jewish, who was approached by Booker T. Washington to say, can we do something about segregation in education? Knowing that common thread. And so my mother was able to go to a middle school in the Deep South where it was segregated. It changed the trajectory of my life. And so for me, I have this feeling every day I wake up, what is it that I can do to pay back for the blessing that God has given me? And by the way, this compelling emotion doesn't require you to have any particular deistic relationship. And so today, just in closing, I really just want to remind everybody here, no matter what they say on the news, one person can make a difference. And so today, I suggest that person be you.
That's passion right there.
Oh, shit.
All your
Oh, by the way, I'm going to say something while you mentioned passion, right? We can teach people how to organize around the environment. We can teach people how to be nonviolent. But we can't teach you how to have passion. You have to find that within yourself.
And it may take a lifetime.
But the first thing you got to do is start looking. And organizers will say the place to look at is when you see things that make you angry. T.D. Jakes said, anger without action makes one bitter, not better. So I'm going to throw back to you, Todd, but thank you on the passion note.
So, right, on that note, I think it's also, one of our goals here today is to learn more about the faiths and what sets them apart from one another. All coming from Abraham. So, Brother Jahar, what makes Islam Islam?
First, I have to make a personal disclosure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. How many of you are familiar with New York at all? Okay, good. So you know that if you grew up in New York back in the 60s, no matter what your faith tradition was, you were part Jewish. Really, on Jewish holidays, we used to joke and say, Jewish holidays, you can't buy a loaf of bread. So I grew up in an environment where Christians and Jews and Muslims were active. I grew up, though, born into a family and raised in the Episcopal church. For those who may not know that because of a war that happened in this country, those who were part of the Church of England could no longer be part of the Church of England because they declared war against England. And so they created the American Anglican Church or the Episcopal Church. And so I grew up in that tradition. But also I had the privilege of visiting my grandparents in the Deep South. They were really part of a more fundamentalist Christian expression, Church of God in Christ. And when I visited them as a young person, I discovered something very different than what I had experienced in the, no offense, but we used to refer to ourselves as the chosen frozen. That when you go to the Kojic church, it's alive. But also, their faith tradition was alive in everything that they did every single day. My aunts were domestics. They worked in the houses of white people. And on Thursday night, part of their ministry was to go to the Senior Citizen Center and serve white people dinner as part of their service. I'm like, really? They were like, yeah, this is how we give back. I said, you've been giving back all week. Bible study every Wednesday night. Church twice on Sunday. They said, God is everywhere. I said, man, this is deep. I mean, for me, I'm an Episcopalian. You know, church, God is alive every Sunday at 11 o'clock. Dr. King said the most segregated hour in America, Sunday at 11 o'clock. As a teenager, I began exploring every kind of religious tradition. A lot of the musicians in my age, they started looking at New Age religions. And so I followed the trail of them. But then also there was this other social movement that was happening in America. And in the mid-60s, we had the benefit of not only the civil rights movement, but the growth of the Nation of Islam. So living in New York, I got a chance to hear about Malcolm X. And I also had to look at some of the contradictions coming rooted in an understanding of the Jewish tradition, growing up, being in the church and seeing the church is not being active and engaged in their faith around a critical time, civil rights movement. And then Malcolm X and others saying, we are committed to social justice because God wants us to be on the side of what's right. I said, oh, this is interesting. So the principles of Islam for me became the last stop on the train of faith. The Old Testament, the New Testament, and then the last testament, the Quran. Saying that I believe in God, I believe in all of the prophets. Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, Jesus as the Messiah, and the one that would come after him. The New Testament says there will come one after him that will bring a law and will bring you into all truth. This is the message from Jesus. And so I began looking and said, you know what? I think the one that fits that description is the Prophet Muhammad. It rectified for me the contradictions of race, where in Islam, it's evident when you see the journey to pilgrimage to Mecca, all of humanity answering the call of Abraham, independent of their language and their color. Malcolm X talks about this as he returns from Mecca, that there's no superiority of a black over a white or a white over a black. And Dr. King reminds us that it's not the color of our skin, but the content of our character. As a college student, I made the decision that I'm not leaving my Old Testament roots or my New Testament roots by following the last testament. And so I embraced Islam as the tradition that was sent to all of the prophets. And with that, I'll close.
Mom, do you want to speak about kind of some interfaith highlights of your career, kind of maybe efforts going on at the moment?
It's hard to pick one that I think, but I think it's coming to me. You will find out who your real friends are when you have a crisis. And you may not know which one of the people that you think are your friends because there are things that you have done or they have done with you in the past that you thought were not significant, but paid deep emotional deposits with them. You guys live here together, right? Sometimes there's somebody who's going through something and they're not talking about what they're going through. and you encounter them and they say, I was wondering, could you do XYZ for me? And you're like, sure, no problem. You may find out years later that your willingness to embrace them in that moment, that they weren't sharing what was really going, the fear or anxiety or whatever that's going on with them, but you were there for them in that moment, changes everything. So that later on, there's an incident and you say, do you stand with me? And you begin to find out that it's because of a deep emotional deposit that you made along the way that you thought was insignificant, but meant a lot to them. One day I was invited to speak before the House of Representatives in Richmond. And some people said, well, why is the government allowing the Imam Johari to speak? Isn't he one of those Muslims? He's a terrorist. The media gathered to be outside. There was going to be a big protest, they said, against the Imam. Some people said, Imam, maybe you shouldn't do this. Some of my friends who were Muslim were saying, look, man, don't rock the boat. Why don't, we could take a knee on this one. When I got the call with the pressure, I was at National Hebrew Congregation. Bruce Lustig was the rabbi then. Bruce leans over to me and says, Imam, I heard what you said, and I want you to know something. I will call every synagogue in Northern Virginia, and we will declare, he'd picked Saturday, as a no shopping day to deprive the government of tax revenue that comes from Jews and Muslims and Christians shopping because we're in solidarity with each other. I'm like, isn't this deep? Muslims are telling me, cool off. That's what they told Dr. King to, cool down, right? It's my rabbi brother who said, I just heard what you said. I didn't ask him for his help. He said, because you stood with us when people attacked the synagogue. You deployed people to say, we'll stand with you. He said, so Imam, I got you. It's those moments when you say, okay, what is it? It's not because I'm a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu. They said to one of the, I won't mention his name, Catholic leader in Washington. He said he was criticized by his congregation. Why are you helping Latinos who are not Catholic? He said, I'm not helping them because they're Catholic. I'm helping them because I'm Catholic. The question for you is living your tradition so that others around you can see the God in you that will raise the God in all of us. Oh, that's it, QED.
Okay. All right. So, Reverend Faith, kind of want to tweak the question a little bit for you. We've been trying to kind of be better environmental stewards.
Hey.
And so we're trying to be more mindful of that. And we know that you have been very mindful of that. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, why is it interfaith power and light? And what is this relationship that you see between faith and environmental stewardship?
Yeah, so I said earlier that all faith traditions in some way reference either doctrinally or by principle or by aesthetics, right? The idea of the earth as either, giving us life, sustaining life, being our home,
Our mother,
our life giver. And so, and I find that to be true even more, especially working. I was thinking as Imam Jahari spoke, I don't have a great story like that, right? But I do have.
You have great stories.
Recently, when my board we were working on writing a response to Juneteenth, right? The national, now it's a federal holiday. And so my board is consistent of Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Unitarian Universalists, and obviously Christians. And it was really very exciting to Baptist, right? So it was exciting to see, and people of different backgrounds, right? Ethnic backgrounds. And so a group wrote a piece, and they talked about racism and environmental racism. And
Come on.
Group of the board, and one of the newer board members challenged because they didn't see environmental or climate change as a racial issue, and they wanted to challenge that. And it was just really a beautiful, this was all in a thread through an email that I was reading, right, because I wasn't part of the writing group, but I was just reading it because we were going to try to get it published for the board, and just reading the way that they negotiated, one, to help this one board member understand the racial impact of it, and why it was related to Juneteenth, how Juneteenth had, why we were choosing that day, right, to write this. And I watched, it was really beautiful to see. The one who was the most outspoken was the Hindu woman, who's a member of the board. And one of the things she said is, as a Hindu person, and she's from Southeast Asia, from India, she said, I never really fully understood racism until I saw what happened with George Floyd, for instance. That was the time that she really understood. She could not understand it fully historically, why people talked about it as systemic, why people talked about the need to undo or to dismantle it in all facets of life. And through this writing together, this group of very diverse members were able to draw upon their own faith traditions, their own sense of ethics, their own sense of right and wrong, to write this really beautiful response to Juneteenth, in applauding and celebrating Juneteenth. And I thought that's certainly not as as exciting maybe as to have a whole Saturdays set aside to actually, because we love a good boycott when necessary. But the idea that this group could have a civil conversation that brought together new understanding, a new vision for the work, and new energy and passion that they could also now help bring back to the organization. And I felt like that was one of the times that I celebrate our interfaith work, and that I could see how interfaith work is so critically important to our national narrative. That we need to be doing more of
That's
this.
right.
And not only related to environment,
That's right.
but related to all of the issues, the moral contemporary issues of our time, right? That we ought to be talking one to another from our faith traditions, not shrinking back from our faith traditions, but not looking for argument either, right? Looking for where we can connect, where we have synergy, where we can align, where we can work together to make ourselves more fully human, right? To live out our humanity in a more full, and I love the title of this panel, that we might find wholeness together. I think that's our purpose on earth, and that's what we all need to figure out, where we do that, right? One of the things when we do especially with children, when we do one of our workshops, we start with how in the garden, in the Hebrew Bible, right? In the garden, God tells the human, Adam, the human one, right? Tells him to, and the human woman, right? To care for the earth, to take care of the earth. That's the first mandate, I say, right? That's the very first mandate, and it's never been rescinded. No tradition rescinds that mandate. And so everybody doesn't have to be a farmer or a gardener, but if you're a scientist, don't be a mad scientist, right? Don't go into your lab and create chemicals and bombs that destroy, but go into your lab and find ways to make life more livable, make life more enhanced, right? Build on this great creation, right? This great gift that's been given us, and all of us can find a way to do that, whatever we're called to do. So if you're a scientist, you're a scientist to improve life. If you're a farmer, do that well, right? Do that with justice. Do that with a sense of outcome that will make life better on this planet for everyone, not just for a few. So I think that for me, that's been the most exciting interfaith experience. I have many of them, but none that's reached to national levels or even General Assembly levels. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
But I want to dovetail, and by the way, Rabbi, this is why I'm not going to piggyback because of our dietary restrictions. You got to smile sometime, guys. I'm not going to piggyback, I'm going to dovetail because of our dietary restrictions. But I will say to everyone here with regard to Reverend's comments, the Quran describes that human beings are the Khalifatullah fil ard. They are the individuals who should be the ones who maintain the ard, the earth. That's our job. No other animal on earth is responsible for the stewardship of the earth. All of them, they care for the earth naturally. Human beings now have reached the stage where because of human interaction, we are destroying our planet. And if there is a religion that joins us together, it is that we, by God, are responsible to take care of it.
Yeah.
And so I said it earlier. If I'm a Muslim or a Christian or Jew or a Hindu or Sikh or Jain or Zoroastrian, I have to drink the water. Your job, and I'm telling you, it's your job. Rest of us up here, Rabbi has hair, I have no hair, she's gray. The responsibility is on you. And the racism element is that the global north is killing the global south. You want to know who the global south are? They're black and brown people. And the people who live in the global north are doing it to the planet, and they have the greatest capacity to adjust their lifestyle to live in a dirty planet that they'll leave for the rest of the generations of black and brown people. By the way, I grew up in an area where, guess what? The places that you put poor people, it's ironic they call them brown fields, right? Areas that are contaminated with lead, other toxins. It's your job. There ought to be something that goes off inside of your faithometer that says, my God, I believe that I have to be responsible to make the changes in our planet. I just came back from the Gambia. We have a project called Soul Power Africa to bring renewable energy to parts of the world that people in the north have forgotten about. Our lifestyle is killing them. Yeah. and then we feed them our plastic. While we start saying we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. But we'll dump our petroleum, our fossil fuel plants on them rather than giving them solar energy. That's what we give each other. So I'm putting it to, by the way, if you feel uncomfortable, you ought to. You, in your lifestyle, reducing, reusing, recycling, demanding that your government, that your planet, take on the responsibility to preserve it for the generations that are to come. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Amen.
If you agree, raise your hand. All right, and if your hand is down, let other people look at you and say, I'm going to talk to you after the session, man. You have a problem. And we can fix it together because our faith calls us to do so.
Again, let's